This podcast contains explicit language.
Bafangu!
Houston, flight is go.
Mila, let's go. SPM, safety contact.
From Assignment X, thesoniashow.com, and Amalgamated Storytelling, this is the Dorking Out Show, the podcast for people who love stories from movies, TV, books, podcasts, and everywhere else.
Welcome to episode 120 of Dorking Out. This is the Mr. Rogers edition. My name is Sonia Mansfield. My regular co-host, Christopher Allen Smith, is still on sabbatical. Who needs him? But joining me today to talk about the new documentary about Mr. Rogers called Won't You Be My Neighbor is my favorite neighbor, my better half, and co-host of Old Movies, New Beer, David Tracy.
Hello, neighbor.
Hello, neighbor. We're going to do this episode, Old Movies, New Beer style.
Yeah, that means we're going to drink.
We're going to drink. So why don't you tell people what we're drinking, and I'm going to pour.
All right, so Old Chub. Avery Brewing.
Oscar Blues.
Oscar Blues Brewing. Out of Colorado. They're both from Colorado.
Yeah.
Avery's from Colorado,
Do they do,
too. I got them confused.
Do they do 1050?
They do.
I like the 1050 a lot. We have a bourbon barrel-aged 1050 in the refrigerator.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, if you can find that one, get it. So they're pretty cool. They do the Dale's Pale Ale. That's probably their most famous, and you can probably get that most anywhere. And they're one of the first craft breweries to embrace the can. Mm-hmm. And the first time I had Dale's Pale Ale was in Philadelphia at a very cool little restaurant there. So, and I was smitten. And it used to be really kind of hard to find. Yeah. But now you can get it everywhere. So we're having Old Chub, which is a Scotch ale.
It's a good one. We've had this one before.
Yep. Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm pro Scotch ale.
You are. You're really into the browns lately, too.
I am into the brown.
You're
Very
down
much so.
with brown.
Yeah.
That sounded wrong.
We should do Oaktown Brown. Have we done Oaktown Brown in Old Movies, New Beer?
No.
That's off topic. All right. Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers. So, Won't You Be My Neighbor is a documentary directed by Morgan Neville, who also did 20 Feet from Stardom.
Which you saw and loved.
Which I super loved. And he's also the producer of some docuseries on Netflix, including Ugly Delicious, which we've actually been watching.
Yeah, we've watched a few of those and liked them.
And Abstract Art of Design, which I think we've watched one or two of those.
You've seen a couple of them, maybe. I watched them all. I watched them all on the plane.
Yeah.
And really, really liked them.
Yeah, so kind of even without knowing, we're actually fans of Morgan Neville.
Yeah, and I would recommend all of that stuff. Abstract's really interesting because every episode deals with a different part of design. So one is like a very famous set designer that's done stuff, everything from like the set to Hamlet that had Benedict Cumberbatch in it, and then also she's done Beyonce concert set design, and U2, and
is this that's the same one that did the show is the same one that did like how he designed Nike tennis shoes?
Yep. Well, the guy who was he's the famous Nike designer that did the very first
the shoes, like the actual shoes, not
Air
the
Jordans.
not the logo and everything, but
no, he worked with
Michael Jordan
and did the first Air Jordans and did the annual Air Jordan.
Yeah, that was super
release.
interesting because you think like this documentary is going to be this like really artsy snobby thing, and it's not that at all. They like really put it in terms that even a dope like me could understand.
Well, it's just really interesting. They have a cartoonist who does a lot of stuff for The New Yorker. They have an interior decorator that's designing. She has a gig designing every restaurant in IKEA, like every IKEA restaurant in the world. A lot of Swedish meatballs.
I was just going to say, it's really just about showcasing those meatballs.
Yeah. And then they had automotive, like one of the main designers for Chrysler. And it's kind of like not just about, and architecture as well. But it's not just about like these creative stuff. It's actually kind of like Chef's Table. It's like these famous people and their creative journey and the challenges that they faced, and they create, everyone is showcased for a good reason. It's really, really kind of an interesting profile of a creative person.
Right.
So this is the perfect producer to do something on Fred Rogers.
Yeah. He's also got another one coming out later this year that I read about that I know that we're going to be all about. And it's about Orson Welles and an unfinished movie he did called The Other Side of the Wind. I guess it's unfinished, but he got access to all the dailies and everything, so he's going to be putting it together, like putting a documentary together and interviewing people, and I think we're going to be all about that.
Yes. There's a farm in blah, 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 where peas are grown there. Do you know what I'm doing?
That's a really good Orson Welles.
That's the worst Orson Welles ever. There's a really great recording. It's actually in a Negative Land song. It's featured in a Negative Land song. But there's a really great recording of him in his later career when he would do, unfortunately, anything.
Right.
And he's doing a radio spot for these frozen peas.
Yeah.
And the copy is written terribly.
Right.
And it's Orson Welles doing the reading. And it doesn't even make, sense. And he basically just lambasts everyone from the sound booth, and it's amazing. And it's about, just look up Orson Welles frozen peas.
Okay,
it's worth it.
I'm gonna do that right after we're done with this because I want to hear it. I can't believe you haven't played it for me.
Yeah,
or maybe you have, but I don't think so because I think
it's gonna be my ringtone. It's gonna be my ringtone.
So, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about Won't You Be My Neighbor, which is about the life of Fred Rogers, who, of course, hosted a children's TV program that, maybe you've heard of, that started in 1963 and ran until August 2001.
Which is crazy. I didn't even know that it actually ran that long.
I didn't either. That was news to me. And there's interviews throughout the documentary with cast members and crew members and his wife and his children and people who work for the Fred Rogers Foundation? Is it Foundation or Institute?
I forget.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And it's cut with footage from the shows. And then, of course, actual interviews with Mr. Rogers that he did, over the years before he passed away. And I super love this documentary. It really touched my heart. And I sobbed like a little girl. Multiple times, and had to sit in the theater when it was over and cry because what he did is it seems like such a lost thing now. He's so decent and kind and thinking about what children need, and I don't think we get a lot of that in children programming now. Not that children programming's all super terrible, but he really thought about what kids needed.
I think it's a lost thing now, but I actually think it was a lost thing then. I think he was just so unbelievably 100% unique.
He's so sincere.
He is so sincere. Surprised that he had a sense of humor. It's funny because everyone you'll see posting on Facebook and all the social media flabbity-flab, they're going to talk about the number of times they cried and all this other stuff. And I want to point out that it's not just because the documentary is done in a certain way where you feel manipulated.
No, I wouldn't say that at all.
Because I'm the first one to be turned off time for the sweeping music. Now I have to feel this. Pixar does it. Yeah. Pixar's really good at you shall feel this way.
Yeah, they're excellent at it.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm cognizant of it. I'm cognizant of and sometimes I just can't help it because I am human.
Well,
but this is not a maudlin documentary.
All movies are trying to manipulate you. That's what they do.
But when you're self-aware of
Yeah.
it, then I feel like in a certain capacity you fail.
But I don't think this isn't like that. I think the reason people are crying throughout it is the sweetness of it and his sincerity and his inherent decency is like a bit of a lost art, for lack of a better term, now, especially now.
Well, I feel like he was the the first public figure that was 100% communicating, wanting to communicate to children and treat them like human beings and not as, and especially in the new medium of television and everything like that. Like what he was doing, just look at as the Spock's psychology, like that was an era of like,
oh yeah, Dr. Spock.
Like it was a different, this is kind of a different take on how you communicate, how you raise children, how you,
because he was all about,
do you shield them? Do you tell them about the hardships of the world? Like he was one of the first people in such a public arena to address this stuff head on.
And to say, like, you should talk to your children and you should listen to what they have to say.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, listen, it's not just like you tell your kids this and you mind your kids. It's not like a full disciplinary, like, children are this weird, some human thing that you order around. Like, it's, he really spoke. And you can tell by the effect it had that he really spoke to children, and it resonated.
Yeah.
I love the part where they said, like, we're going to have a Mr. Rogers Day. This is when it's just the local public television station in Pittsburgh, and they didn't even expect it. And, of course, crowds from everywhere showed up.
Because every kid wanted to meet Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
Didn't you meet Mr. Rogers?
I did meet. It's one of my claims. I feel like it's one of my claims to fame. I'm so honored to have been able to have.
How did you meet him?
So I don't know the full story. I wish I could ask, but somehow I think he must have. So he toured public television stations.
Yes.
I think, or if anything, he went to the public television stations in L.A. And my dad took me, and it was a little. Kind of went onto this like little this little set with a bunch of chairs, and it was like a little stage, and Mr. McFeely came out. He was like the warm-up, and it was just, I don't know, there were probably like 25 kids maybe, and parents, maybe less. And Mr. McFeely came out and talked to us, and he was wearing his his postal outfit and everything like that. And then Mr. Rogers came out, and he sat before us. And
did the kids all lose their minds?
Oh, yeah. One of the things I remember is, like, so kids all had gifts for him. And I remember one kid came up with, like, this, it was just a worn pocketbook. Like, I don't even know what it was, but it was, like, just a really worn kind of a, whatever, paperback book, and handed it to him. Not like a kid's book or anything like that. For all I know, it was... a
Harlequin romance.
A Harlequin romance, Shogun. It's probably Shogun. That was the day.
So popular back then, so maybe.
Who knows? But it's like the kid wanted to give him something, and so that's what he had access to, and he gave him Shogun. But yeah, I remember that.
What did you give him?
I didn't have anything for him, and I was super shy. I didn't go up.
Just kidding.
I was just so shy. But we all came with, they gave us a little piece of paper, like, of like the little, with the trolley and everything like that was kind of our go away thing. But I don't know if I don't know if it's because we did a specific donation, or somehow my dad was aware of it though and got me in, because I was just an obsessed, loved, integral part of my childhood and who I am today is Mr. Rogers.
Well, I
think I can say that for a lot of my generation.
You are. Our animals are fighting behind us.
Yeah, they want to get some mic time to talk about Mr. Rogers.
It's funny you say like that he was so important to you because you are a very, I'm not just saying this because I'm married to you. You're a really good person.
It's the old chub talking. Thanks, old chub.
No, you are. Like, sorry, everybody, but we're getting all gross. But like, David's a really good person, and you're, a really good dad. You listen. You talk, but you also listen.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Yeah. He taught my cousin how to tie his shoes.
Aw. That's probably how I learned.
Just from the whole ritual of him coming in and putting on his shoe, taking off it and kind of putting on the cardigan sweater and all this other stuff.
One of my oldest friends likes to tell people about how I taught her to tie her shoes. So but I probably learned it from Mr. Rogers. My mom said that I loved Mr. Rogers so much, and that I didn't even care about the land of make-believe.
Oh, I love
that. Like
land.
when the trolley would go through the tunnel, I was like, bye. Like I would like wander off and then come back for Mr. Rogers. Isn't that funny?
When I came back from seeing Mr. Rogers, I now think it was actually right after I think it was after I saw him. I really wanted a trolley, and I took in our drawer we had a box of straws, and I set up all the straws like trolley tracks basically around the house and up the stairs, and used every one of them just so I could replicate my own little red trolley going to make believe. I love that, and I love the magic picture that showed all the factory. I still like watching factory stuff of how things being made, whether it's toilet paper or candy bars or whatever. They actually
do stuff like that on Sesame Street.
They do, and they do it in the live action bits after Daniel Tiger.
Yeah.
Now they'll show little things. I still like watching that stuff. It's always interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting.
Mass production. It's fascinating.
What was your favorite part? Like, was any of it like make you get choked up at all? Like, I sobbed repeatedly.
I got choked up multiple times. I don't think I've ever been choked up so many times in a movie. I'm definitely one to get affected and get choked up in a film. It's just, but it's always like one or two parts. But this is like a movie where like there are just a bunch of notes, a bunch of beats where I was hit hard. The special needs kid who did the drawing of Mr. Owl, and then he pulled out the puppet of Mr. Owl visiting him. Kid in the wheelchair. Even just the lineup of kids like around the Pittsburgh block.
See him.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
He just, it's funny too, because he had his comment, like he addressed like the tragedies of his day in a way that was just so, not just trying to explain life to children, but just respecting the dignity of the kid, treating the kid like a human being.
Yeah, well, people think that...
Not like talk to him like an adult, but treat them like a human being.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's something in the documentary where they're explaining, isn't it when Robert Kennedy was shot? Or
yeah, Robert Kennedy.
They actually did a thing where like they explain like what assassination is and stuff.
What's
and it's
assassination?
Yeah,
it's
because kids for sure are hearing that word, right? And we've witnessed this stuff recently, like during the 2016 election. Like obviously, like the best candidate didn't win, and you were touring schools for our son.
I was.
And you went the next day, and there were kids very upset about a presidential election, which you think kids, they don't care. Like, they're all about, video game. They're all Minecraft and Spider-Man or whatever. Like, they don't care. But, like, they care, and things affect them. And there were kids, young kids, 6, 7, 8 years old, like feeling really scared about what they were seeing on TV and how maybe upset their parents were and things like that. And you were seeing it like firsthand in the school, like what teachers are having to like sit down and explain to kids.
Yeah, I saw a classroom and it was like circle time and all these kids and it was dead silent. It was like a wake. And I remember one little kid talking about like, you know, I feel really upset and my parents are really upset. And it was like this, it was just a huge...
Yeah, like, and just little kids saying, like, I'm worried that, you know, my friend's going to be deported or, you know, just these crazy things that you think go over kids' heads.
Well, it's the same thing with, it's just always something to be mindful, whether it's something extreme as that, or if it's, or extreme as divorce, or anything like that. It's so easy to forget that kids are like...
They're little sponges.
Their ears and their minds, they're like satellite dishes. Like, they're just taking so much more in. And what they're taking in at that age is completely shaping the way that they perceive the world. Like it's
because they don't have like our experiences or our filters or
our prejudices
or whatever. They're just taking it in. Like
they're formulating their worldview. Yeah,
they're mainlining this awful shit that's happening.
They're formulating their worldview, their life view, their you know, so many things. And it's like a lot of times we talk with kids, like even when a kid doesn't, like I read a lot of stuff about special needs kids, and you'll see like sometimes there'll be some kids that are not very receptive and they don't make eye contact and they could even be nonverbal or anything like that, and it's really easy to not even think about it, but they're taking it all in. They're taking it all in, how you address them, if you treat them like they're a little baby because of, you know, whatever their challenges are or anything like that. Like kids are smart. They take this stuff in, and it's so easy to forget that and to not be mindful of it. And that was something that this is a man who dedicated his whole life to communicating to kids this way. In a medium where back then nobody knew what to do with it. They didn't even think of it as a way of benefit to society.
So, they were just, you know, let's throw a pie in his face. Like that sort of thing. That'll make a kid laugh.
Yeah.
It wasn't about, like, trying to educate people.
Yeah. We still don't know what to do with a medium half the time.
I would say that is true.
But this is, and
that's one of the other things that's really good in the documentary. And, you know, once again, I don't want to like crap all over like all children's programming, because there's some really good children's programming out there, but they also like kind of show how children's programming changed over the years and how Mr. Rogers always stayed the same.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things they talked about was how he embraced the silence, and he would do these, and then they show like these really would seem like really long sequences of him just not talking, like him just like peeling an apple or feeding the fish, and it's just quiet,
putting on his shoes,
just quiet, because you know anyone who watches kids shows now know that quiet does not happen.
No, quiet doesn't happen in much media at all.
Right.
That's always like, you've heard me gripe about this like an old man, that there's not enough silence. There's not enough. Everything has got to be at the pace of a Transformers movie, especially in episode 1 of a new TV show, because there's just so much content. Yeah.
Well, and then when they do put out something that's quiet, people are uncomfortable and they don't know how to deal with it. I watched a movie last year called A Ghost Story, and it's quiet for quite a bit of it, and people just didn't know what to think about that movie. It's a weird movie for sure, but like how quiet it was. Long stretches with no dialogue, things like that. But anyway.
Just watch Vim Vendors. That'll cure you of all the silence. Wings of Desire.
What kind of movies make you cry?
I don't know. Pee-wee movies. Up in Smoke.
Up in Smoke.
You know. One of my it's actually part of my wedding vows is the moment in the Lord of the Rings when everybody bows. Yeah. The hobbits go to bow. Yeah. To the king, Aragorn, and he says no. Like, you bow before nobody.
Right.
And like,
they all bow.
Like, yeah, everybody bows.
Yeah.
Like the huge mass
and
crowd
you cry.
Shot. I just, every time, it just kills me.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that...
battery health is good on the laptop, if you heard that little ding sound.
Woo-hoo.
So that's good to know. Thank you.
Would you say
MacBook.
the Lord of the Rings movies are like your comfort movies?
Yeah.
Because I've been thinking a lot about comfort movies this week.
That's a comfort movie for me. You know I love Amelie. Mm-hmm. That would be a comfort movie for me. Casablanca is probably a comfort movie.
That's funny.
For
That's
me.
one of my comfort movies too.
Yeah, it's funny because there's definitely things in. I bring Pixar up because those first 15 minutes of Up are always tough. There's Inside Out. There's stuff, but at the same time, those are movies designed to.
Toy Story 3.
Yeah, those are designed.
It makes me cry.
Yeah, there's stuff in those films, but at the same time, it's Pixar movies are not, save for Cars. Pixar movies are not made for kids. They're made for 40-something males with young children, and we're gonna tug at you. Like that's. I almost feel like I'm the demographic for Pixar. Nobody else, but white males. Yeah. 40s.
Smith
probably.
and I have talked about this before on the show about Pixar movies because I've wondered, like, we because they're animated, people are like, well, they're for kids, and I was like, but they're not really for kids. Like, I can't take Calvin to see Incredibles 2. Like, he's 6 years old, but I don't think he would appreciate it or particularly enjoy it. Or maybe he would enjoy it, but he wouldn't get it.
They do some. I mean...
But Smith would argue, like, well, they're not kid movies, they're family movies. There's a difference, which I think is a valid point.
That's a valid point. I think Monsters, Inc., Bugs Life,
right,
Coco, those are all pretty good. Cars are all pretty good. And Calvin loves...
Calvin loves the Toy Story movies.
Yeah. He loves the Toy Story films. We do,
Me too.
But I don't know. And it's funny when you talk about children's programming. I mean, I think on the whole there is better children's television today than there was when I was growing up. I mean, the good stuff was good, at least in terms of educational and fulfilling emotionally and intelligence. Right. You know, for a kid, would be Mr. Rogers, Sesame Street,
Electric Company,
and that was...
That was it, right? Everything else was Looney Tunes.
Unless it was like a local station's child's thing.
Right.
Like that was... what was the Magic Mirror, though? That was good.
Romper Room.
Yeah. Reading Rainbow.
Yeah.
But
everything else was... I mean, Tom and Jerry, Looney Tunes.
Yeah, it was...
Fat Albert.
Scooby-Doo.
I love Scooby-Doo.
Seals and Crofts stuff. Sigmund the Sea Monster.
Mm-hmm.
But... today, I think probably because there's so many channels now, and it's not just relegated to... Also, when we were kids, it was relegated to...
Public television, PBS, right? That's
PBS or UHF, and it was only in the morning and only like Saturday morning or something
Yeah.
like that. Now they're, just the idea that you have channels like Sprout that are solely dedicated to a particular age. Granted, they have commercials and that is
We've talked about,
That's a
you and I
thing.
have talked about this before, how it was a big deal when like a cartoon was on in primetime TV. Like you would never miss It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. Because
No.
cartoon was on at night.
That was
That
what
like
was.
never happened.
Well, that was the crazy thing about.
And if you missed it, you
had to
blew
wait a
it.
year.
You blew it.
if you missed Charlie Brown, you had to wait a year.
Yeah.
And it was the same. It was an event. Dolly Madison made bucks
Yeah.
on the Charlie Brown stuff. And that's why those specials were so huge. That's why they did the Grinch. That's that's what made Simpsons such a crazy thing too.
Right. I mean, now animated stuff is whatever. Like, there's lots of animated stuff. But back in the day,
I think when Simpsons came on, that was the first primetime TV show cartoon animated since like the Flintstones.
right? Yeah.
Flintstones or Jetsons.
Yeah. And then after that, it was like, here's Capital Critters and Fish Police and all that. And the
Yeah.
Critic and,
Yeah.
But now there's way more of that stuff, like Family Guy and all that. But
Yeah, but
which I would
primetime
never let my kid watch. But
animation was always relegated to hence Saturday morning. Yeah. Saturday morning was an event in households for the kids. I was up.
6 a.m.
Oh yeah, I was up first thing. My sister would be bad and out all night, and she knew first thing in the morning, Saturday morning, she could tap 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 on the living room window because little David would be down there in his footy pajamas watching the cartoons.
Yeah.
And I would let her in, and I wouldn't know why she was out, and she'd probably say something like, "Oh, I was just smelling the flowers," or something.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm gonna go back to watching
You're so
Wacky
sweet.
Races or
You're so sweet.
something like that.
I was the same. Like, you watched cartoons from like 6 a.m. till whenever American Bandstand came on.
Yeah, or it went to
Or
the
so-
live
or-
action
yeah.
stuff too. It started to go to live action stuff like Shazam and ISIS and
And then when I got older, like I would still watch cartoons, but I wouldn't start quite so early, and I would stay on to watch, Soul Train or American Bandstand.
yeah. There's American's Bandstand or Soul Train kind of signified the end.
Yes.
But then I would switch to UHF and watch Simba and
wish-
Battle of the Planets.
Battle of the Planets.
Yeah.
We were just talking about that one the other day.
That's good stuff.
It is good stuff. Oh, that was a big hit in my house. With
The
me, anyway.
but today it's like we're totally off. We're off the rails
No,
about
no.
children's programming
No, I
and
think
children's television.
That's totally fine. That's kind of where I thought we would end up. We have a few things that Calvin likes to watch that I think are still like solid, good
I think they're
children's programming.
Yeah, and they're not just
And for any new listeners, our son is 6
yeah.
and he's autistic. So
But yeah, so
he repeats a lot of anything that he sees. So we try to be a little careful.
Curious George, the TV series of Curious George,
Which he's been watching since he was like 2.
is still really, really good and amazing.
And he still loves it.
And there's some really funny adult humor in there.
For
Also,
sure.
it's got a really good kind of a science base to it, like teaching him how to do. It's really good, and he has
I
equal
actually
time
think-
in the country and equal time in the city.
I think Curious George is like a legit good show for kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
George is super sweet. He is, he's very curious. It's right there in the title. And those are good things to be.
Yeah. Although there is kind of a Cousin Oliver moment when the little girl pops up at season 5
Yeah,
or whatever.
Allie Oops or whatever. She's
yeah.
she's a little crazy, but
Yeah.
but
I
we hardly ever get to that season because Calvin loves those like first like 3.
The early ones. There is a funny one. There's a Halloween special for Curious George, and instead of the Headless Horseman, it's like the legend of
No Noggin.
No Noggin.
Sorry, I stole your thunder.
No, you can say it. No Noggin.
No Noggin.
Which is such a funny. There's Lake Wanna Sink Lake.
Yeah.
There's just so many.
It's just a silly one.
Yeah, it is.
Well, what do you think of? So, of course, Mr. Rogers has his now, I guess, a spin-off show.
Daniel
right?
Tiger.
Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Mm-hmm. What do you think about Daniel Tiger? Our son loves Daniel Tiger, by the way. He watches them all the time.
It is the sweetest show that is not only a guide for little Daniel Tigers in the world, but also for the parents of Daniel Tigers in the world too. There's a lot of good parent tips. There's some good parental tips in that show, definitely.
Yeah.
There's a moment actually where they do, when you get really mad, you count to
4.
Count to 4.
If you get so mad that you want to roar, take a deep breath and count to 4.
Yeah, and there's a part where the mom, understandably, gets really mad.
Yeah.
She has good reason to be.
I think they're dumping sand all over the house, if I remember correctly, because we've watched this just a few times.
Yeah, but I love that, like, she then has to do the take a deep breath and count to 4, and then she talks to Daniel. Like, there's little bits of it. So if you're an adult watching the Daniel Tiger stuff, there's not a lot of...
there's not a lot...
There's no, like, little winks to the adults. There's no like, humor to the adults. The songs...
It's 100% for kids.
The songs are auto-tuned, which drives me up the wall, generally. Like, they're so pitch perfect, it's weird sounding. But at the same time, they use repetition, and it works. It, like, hits the kid just right, and it actually, like... That actually lights the little, like, oh, right, I washed my hands now. Like, it really is good at setting little social cues and emotional cues.
It teaches really good lessons.
Yeah.
Really good lessons. My niece, Lucy, just turned 10, but even when she was younger, like, she started watching Daniel Tiger, like, when it first started, like, in 2011 or something like that. And my sister would say, like, you should show Calvin Daniel Tiger. He has really good lessons in it. And he does. Like, we have been able to repeat things that we've seen on Daniel Tiger so that Calvin will understand.
Yeah, it clicks.
So, things like grown-ups come back. When we try something new, we're going to talk about what we do, all the stuff about
going to the doctor.
Yeah, going to the doctor, using the potty, like all of these things. They have that core message that you get from Mr. Rogers.
The apps are good too.
The apps are really good too.
Apps are really good too.
They're all about, like, honesty and decency and talking to your children and listening, but also about, like, just loving your kids and playing with your kids. And, like, the parents are all very, like, playful.
Yeah.
They're not, it's not Charlie Brown parents. It's not like, blah, 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 blah. They're part of the show. They interact with their kids.
I like how they take make-believe from Mr. Rogers and they turn it into a cartoon. And the key, like, signature Mr. Rogers puppet, Daniel the Tiger, who was always my personal favorite. I loved Daniel Tiger as a kid. He lived in a clock. How cool.
That's pretty cool.
How cool is that? He had his little wristwatch.
By the way, our son would love to live in a clock.
I'd like to live in a clock. Who wouldn't want to live in a clock? Maybe a little noisy. But they take the whole setting of make-believe, and then all those characters come to life, and that's kind of the world that they live in. And you see, that's where the nods to adults come in, is that you will see little nods to, like, to the platypuses and to, the way, like, Meow Meow, what's her name, Kitty Cat, and Lady Elaine is now Miss Elena, one of the kids. Mm-hmm. And her mom. Well,
and all the original characters are there.
Yeah.
But they're grown up and have kids of their own or whatever. So there's, like, O the Owl and X the Owl. And
one thing that's kind of funny, though, is
was Stan the Music Man and Mr. Rogers? I don't remember him.
I don't remember Stan the Music Man. But one thing that's kind of funny, though, is that it's made in Canada because a lot of children's animation is done in... For whatever reason, the Canada is killing it when it comes to animation for cartoons.
Well,
so you'll see a lot of French.
They're kind of killing it in every way lately, if you ask me.
But Canada's always been good in like animation.
Yeah.
And children's programming for animation. There's like, for example, the grandfather is called Grandpère.
Yeah.
And has a French accent. It's like, oh, they're Quebecois. The Daniel Tiger. I had no idea. And then, yeah, like Nelvana is up in Toronto, I think. But yeah, there's a lot of, I think Super Y was done in Toronto also. There's just a lot of stuff. I think actually the Curious George stuff was animated.
That would not surprise me.
I think there's some
One
Canadian
of the things
influence
I like
there.
about Daniel Tiger, that I like about Curious George, that I like about Calvin's been watching Peppa Pig lately. There aren't bad guys. There are no villains in these shows. Like, everybody's good. There might be misunderstandings, but there's no villain.
Well, that's one of the things.
It's one of the things I don't like about some movies that I watch, where they have like bad people. But I know that they need conflict for stories. I get it. It's just
children's movies and all movies. There has to be, I guess, you have to have your feeling of conflict, and you have to have and it transcends to, or it happens in children's movies as well. And I feel like it's lazy. It's kind of cheap for some kids' films, because a kid doesn't need that. You can totally get the
Peanuts
kids' attention.
Movie doesn't have that
Without a weird villain component. Yeah, the Peanuts movie is a good example. There is a villain in it, but it's a little funny little side story that doesn't affect the overall story at all with the Red Baron.
Right.
But the main storyline for Peanuts is perfect. Mm-hmm. That's a really good underrated movie. As you know, I love it.
I love that one too. That one actually got me choked up when we saw it too, because it is so
I get choked up at the end of that one.
What I think is funny is some of the movies we've watched with Calvin where they put a villain in it. The villain is always trying to like take over like a business or a town or something, so that he can build something else. It's like real estate stuff. And I was like, do they think the kids know about real estate or care about real estate? Or like why is it always about, oh, they're gonna buy the museum and then they're gonna knock it down and put a parking garage, or they're gonna take over the town and they're gonna build a stupid theme park, which by the way kids love. So I don't understand why anyone would think that makes them the villain.
Or like Sing.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much about Sing that I thought was cute and funny, and I like the character, I like the main character, but the whole Seth MacFarlane Russian mafia bears and tracksuits, totally...
It's so weird.
And not even... The conflict is the guy's trying to put on a show, and you can just... There's so many ways.
And he's got like no money, and he's gonna lose his theater and stuff. That's the conflict. Why they added this whole thing with like, it's so weird,
completely unnecessary.
Is it something that? Did they add something like that to appeal to like older kids so they wouldn't be bored, or I don't know. I don't know, but it's super weird. That movie is
Secret Life of Pets, kind of too. I mean, the rabbit's kind of funny, but I mean. The best part of Secret Life of Pets is the premise, and the first 15 minutes and the last 10 minutes.
Yeah, for sure. Like
the in between.
It would be like a really good short.
Yeah, it's true.
It'd be a really great animated short. Which, by the way, I think the beginning was playing like in front of other movies, like as a like, hey, coming soon, Secret Lives of Pets, and they were just showing the beginning. Of Secret Lives of Pets, and people went bananas, right? Because the beginning is so cute, and then you go and see the movie, and you're like, "What the f is all of this? Like, who cares about all this?" What a weird movie.
There's some funny parts in the whole chase scene.
There's definitely funny parts, and Calvin goes back to it every once in a while, even though I don't know if he understands quite everything that's going on in it. He does like it.
Yeah.
And he likes the music.
Yeah.
What do you think about, oh no, you already mentioned it. the auto-tune stuff.
Oh yeah, the auto-tune stuff drives me nuts.
But you were such a good dad because you put a playlist together with all the awful auto-tune Daniel Tiger songs.
It's not even a playlist. I bought the album. I spent money on it. I bought, and what's funny is that the kid likes certain songs just on repeat ad infinitum.
But the songs are really short.
They are, but we would listen. I've listened to that thing so many times. It's crazy.
You're a good dad.
That car soundtrack.
So,
the other thing I was impressed with... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
I was going back to Mr. Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
The Mr. Rogers Foundation
Yes.
rep. I forget his name. He was so good. Mm-hmm. He was like a young personification of like the Mr. Rogers philosophy of being.
They have really good interviews in this, I thought. Like,
interviews
they
are
interview
really
his
good.
wife, his children, crew members, and they had really good stories that really, they're not saying that Mr. Rogers, let's bring it all back to Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
They're not saying that he's a saint by any means, but like they are saying like, here's someone who, really did care about kids, and they have some really good stories about him. And there's some funny stuff in the movie too.
That one crew member guy is so funny.
Yeah,
Like,
they had some really good funny stories.
the crew's pretty salty.
Yeah,
And
that's probably always true, right?
That's always true. The crew, absolutely, 100%. Crew is salty, always salty.
But one of the things that always goes around about Mr. Rogers, like people try to like pass off these fake stories. So it's like, he's got a bunch of tattoos, or
he was in SEALs.
He was in the SEALs. He was a sniper. All these things that are ridiculous, and it's like this thing that people just can't accept that somebody was this decent and
He was gay,
or he was gay.
Yeah,
because he was so sensitive and caring. It's like someone can't just be sensitive and caring. He must be gay or whatever. And, of course, this documentary lays all that to waste. But I went to Rotten Tomatoes to see like, oh, what's the score? Because it seems like such a great documentary. And it has 99%. And I was like,
who's the 1%?
well, I was like, Emma, what dick gave this movie a bad review, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to like name who it is, or it's like some whatever website. It's nothing super reputable or whatever. But he kind of took issue with the way it handles Officer Clemens, and the man who plays him is Francois Clemens, who is a gay man.
Gay black man. And of course, there's these very like famous sequences where like Mr. Rogers is like cooling his feet in the pool, and he invites like Officer Clemens to put his feet in the pool when like there was a whole thing about like, segregation going on. And so it was like this really big deal. And on a side note, it was also a big deal when he had like Yo-Yo Ma on, or when he had kids with disabilities on. Like he was trying to remind people like, we're all human, we're people, like let's act like it. Yeah.
But so anyway, this review kind of took issue with the way that this is handled in the documentary, that Francois Clemens is gay, and that Mr. Rogers kind of advised him not to come out, and I told him he couldn't be on the show and be out or something, and he was like, this hints at like a darker side and a place that the documentary could have gone that would have been interesting. But I don't think I didn't get any impression that he did it in any way to be like, because Mr. Rogers was a pastor and pretty conservative dude, but
they had friends.
But he was, but I wouldn't even use the word conservative. Like he had like Christian values, but like those Christian values are pretty liberal by today's standards.
Super liberal. And Clemens would have been the first one to.
Well, he was saying like, they will fire you. Like I felt like he was trying to protect him. I didn't take it as, because he said, I personally don't care that you're gay. I just don't think you should come out and be out as a way to protect him. Don't you think? That's how I took it.
So the way I took it, and
And by the way, they were friends until Mr. Rogers passed away. Like,
he
doesn't take any issue with what happened.
There's
But this reviewer did.
he views Rogers as like one of the first people to openly support him and love him for who he was.
Yeah.
Like, he was like a father figure to him.
Right.
Maybe that guy forgot when he said that, but the reason, and it makes sense to me too. The show is subversive in certain respects. They were black and white making a statement about black and white, about segregation, about having this character on this show, having someone who's African American who plays a police officer. Like, you're making your statement, and you are representing the entire African American community.
Right.
If you then, on top of that, now, bring up the point that he's homosexual,
Right.
then you've, in certain respects, you're making these strides for this very legitimate, very important cause, and that is equal rights. So it's like you kind of have to, like, you chose your battleground. It's going to be segregation and how these two populations can get along.
Yeah.
That would be, and I have no doubt that Mr. Rogers would do this. What he would probably do is have like another character or some other way of introducing that into the social.
Right.
So it's like the role that he plays in the show is unbelievably important. And I think he would have diminished that. Not on purpose or anything like that, but the message would have been muddled at that point, and it would have been less effective.
Right.
And it would have been less persuasive. So I think that was the reason.
And I just didn't take it as anything hateful.
There's nothing about that man that was. I don't know if there's.
Like, I'm sorry if the documentary didn't dig up some dirt for you that you wanted, but like,
people like to have a little scandal. Maybe
seemed like a solid dude.
Yeah, he was a pretty solid dude, and I love that he made statements, and I love that he was able to.
I love the old footage of him testifying before Congress.
Yeah,
to get funding for public television, that was really cool.
Public television has been this, for whatever reason, it's been this embattled thing that has always been threatened with cuts. Like, it's always been
like the idea that it somehow pushes a liberal agenda, and I'm like, oh, so education is a liberal agenda.
I sure hated that Civil War documentary. Subversive. Julia Childs, commie. Bob Ross. Antique Roadshow. How dare you?
That's offensive.
The This Old House. That's ageist. The
what about New Houses?
Yeah. The funny thing too is the budget for public television is nothing. Like, it is. It's not.
No, it's 100%. It's 100% like a.
When people threaten, like,
liberals care about public television, so let's cut it, right?
You could cut the head of the EPA's, I don't know, hotel budget by 5%, and you'd pay for public television for 20 years, probably. Yeah. I don't know. It's nothing. There's so many things you could cut. It's just making a statement.
Yeah.
You're just trying to make a statement.
Well, it's a shitty statement.
It is.
So it's really good. We recommend this.
Yeah. It's a shoo-in. If it doesn't win an Academy Award, win the Academy Award. Here's the thing, and I feel like it's very because of the timing of this documentary, you might think, oh, it's just because of you couldn't have picked. The super cynical of you could think like, oh, you couldn't have picked better timing for this. It's like lightning strike, perfect,
right?
Timing for this documentary, which it is. But I think this documentary would have had equally an impact last year, the year before last.
Absolutely.
I don't think you want to see this as like, oh, this is like a statement about the current affairs. It might seem like a statement about the current affairs just because...
Well, they started filming this before
so
the election, so it's not any reflection on that, but...
Yeah.
But it is, like, with everything going on right now and with, like, our awful garbage human being of a president and his, Legion of Doom, like... separating children from their parents at the border and all this stuff, to watch something like this about a man who's so decent and caring and cares about kids, and it's gonna hit you in all the right spots, and it is going to... How sad for you when you think a documentary about Mr. Rogers is somehow a slight on your administration or something, or on your politics.
Yeah.
Like, this documentary is criticizing my politics. Oh, are your politics about, like, treating kids like shit? Then yes, it's a slight at your politics.
Yeah, I think the documentary is good on its own right.
Yes.
Timing, current events. This will be a good documentary 5 years from now. This will be a good documentary 20 years from now.
Right.
It's like you mentioned at the top of the podcast. It's how you treat kids. It's how you listen to kids. Listening to kids. Mm-hmm. Treat them like human beings.
What?
That is like an evergreen message.
Look at you crazy damn liberal. Treat kids like human beings. What's next? Not keeping them in cages, David? I'm depressed now.
I know. You went there.
I did. I'm sorry. I hate our government so much right now.
Okay. So there's that.
I like the old chub. It's really good. What do you think of the old chub?
Old chub.
I'm talking about the beer, by the way, not the president.
Yeah.
Hey-o.
Beer is good.
Good.
Movie's good. Highly recommend it. You can be the most, it doesn't matter what your frame of mind or reference is. I think you'll enjoy this movie. I think there's something that literally anybody and everybody could get something out of.
I think so too.
So.
Good call.
Everyone should see this film.
I would agree with that. Can you say that about a lot of movies?
I really cannot.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Everyone go see Won't You Be My Neighbor. After you give us a good review on iTunes. Give us a good review. You can find us at thedorkingoutshow.com. You can find me at The Sonia Show on Twitter or thesoniashow.com. David, where can people find you on the internet if they want to?
LinkedIn.
MySpace. Friendster.
I'm on Friendster. Friendster forever.
And of course, you can hear us on Old Movies, New Beer.
Yeah,
we've got a really good one coming soon.
Yeah, it's been in the works for 20 years.
It feels like it has, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, maybe a two-parter.
Well, this was really fun. Thank you, David, for coming on.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
I will always have you on the show.
Thank you.
You're
to
my
those
favorite.
who listen. Oh, thank you. I like you.
I like you just the way you are.